In this presentation, we're going to be checking out some of the improvements that have been made to Maya 2016 Extension 1. We're going to be focusing on LookDev and the new utility nodes that have been added to the Hypershade window, and we're going to use those to do 3 examples in this scene. So the first example that we're going to check out is how we can use some of these utility nodes to add in more detail onto this simple texture map. I want to get a little bit more wood grain going across that, and we're going to use a couple of the utility nodes to mix these 2 file textures together. So let's go ahead and check out the new utility nodes, and the ones that we're going to be using for this are Color Composite and Color Correct. So if we drag a Color Composite node out, you'll notice that this is a very simple compositing node. Anyone who's done any work in Photoshop or any compositing application will immediately feel comfortable with this because it's a very basic building block of compositing. So what we want to do is we want to drop our first texture into color A, and we'll drop our second texture into color B, and we'll switch our operator over to screen, and we'll just drop that factor down. So that looks okay, but it's going to be a lot brighter. And if we go ahead and we just drag the out color of that color composite node into the shader, you can see obviously we've lost that kind of moody poppy feel that I had before. So what we want to do is we want to introduce another node into our shading tree, and this is going to be a color correction node. So let's go ahead and grab that color correct node. We'll drop that into our scene here. So with the color correct node in there, we're going to go ahead and drop that color composite into the input for that. We're going to take the out color of that color correct node and put it into our shader. And now we're going to start working with the color correction node. And again, the sliders and attributes would be immediately, they should be totally understandable by anyone who's done any color correction work in the past. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and just play with the mids a little bit. So we're going to drop that gamma down a little, kind of give it a little more pop there. And it looks a little washed out still, so we're going to go ahead and give it a little bit more value. We'll kind of pop that up a bit like that. And you can see now that we've got this really nice kind of wood grain sort of being mixed into that guy. And the last thing that we might want to do is kind of play around with this center logo a little bit. So if we change the U, this is going to go from 0 to 360, again, pretty standard. We're going to go ahead and just leave this pushed off a little bit, and I'm going to just drop that saturation down just to kind of make it fit in with the scene a little bit better. So that's just a quick example of how we can use a couple of those utility nodes to do some color correction work and some screening work to blend together those 2 texture maps and have a lot of flexibility and control over the overall end look or feel. So the next thing that we're going to look at is actually a problem that you might not immediately see as a problem, but once I kind of point it out to you, you're going to immediately recognize, okay, that's an issue, and how do we get around that? Well, what we've got here is we've got this number 32 and then this stripe going down the side of my character, and I want that stripe to be red. So that's pretty straightforward. I'm using a ramp to do that. So you would assume that I could just sample this texture map, this gray value with this red value, and it would just work. But there's going to be a couple problems, and we're going to use some of the utility nodes to fix that. So if we solo that number 32, it gives me an easy way to jump in here and go ahead and sample that color. So I know that we've got that right color into our ramp here. Now, obviously, if we solo the ramp, you can see, yep, those reds are exactly the same. The problem is if we solo on top of our layered texture here, which is just basically layering 32 on top of the ramp, on top of the overall diffuse channel, you'll see that there's an issue. So as soon as we do that soloing operation there, you can see that obviously the red's a lot punctured here, and it's kind of washed out here. And if you even look over here in our material view, you can sort of see through this, and it's kind of transparent. The reason that's happening, if we just solo the ramp here one more time and double click on the alpha to display it, the reason that's happening is the alpha is based on the luminosity. So that's not really going to work. What we want to do is we want to use a couple of these new nodes, the color logic node and the color condition node, to essentially take anything that's not black and make it white. And we're going to use that color logic node to do that. So this is a really, again, very powerful node, but very straightforward. So what we want to do is we want to do an operator. We want to compare color A with color B. So we're going to basically say, all right, if it's not black, it's going to send out the opposite, the Boolean. This just sends out, 0 and 1 based on the operator, true or false. So what we've got now is we've got our switch that's basically doing our 0 and 1. We need to have that drive something, and we're going to use a color condition to have that pick up that Boolean and turn it into something that's useful. So we're basically going to say if it's one thing, it's going to be black. If it's another thing, it's going to be white. So we'll just grab that out Boolean and drive that into condition. So now if we solo this, look at where that ramp is. As soon as we hit solo on this guy, now you can see we've now got that alpha channel exactly where we need it. So all we have to do is go back in here, grab that mid layer, the ramp layer, and drag and drop that onto the alpha. in a matter of a few seconds. Obviously, if we solo this guy, you can see the reds are exactly the same. And if we turn off the soloing and get the shading back on, it now looks pretty good. So the last one that we're going to look at here is color constant. And this one's really useful if you want to have something drive a lot of different attributes and you want one slider to do it. And that's what I've actually got set up here. If I move this slider around here, you can see it's driving almost all the color on that character if I wanted to change the overall color of that character, except for this shader that we were just working with. So all we really need to do is drag that color constant onto the color gain. And now we have a simple shader, a simple slider that allows me to really, push this character into whatever color I want him to be based on that simple slider. So very, very fast, easy, and it lets you build shading networks that someone else could look at. So the last example that we're going to check out is my favorite one, which is the new noise node. We have a simplex noise node, and it allows you to do a lot of really pretty cool things. And we're going to use it to add in a little bit of bump detail on our leg of this other character here. So the first thing that it does that's really kind of nice is it doesn't have tiling artifacts. So let me show you an example of what a tiling artifact is. If we grab something like the legacy fractal, drag that guy in here, and we'll just shove this into color on that guy, and we'll make this repeat a bunch of times, like 30 times. You can really clearly see the tiling artifact on that texture map, very, very clearly. And the new simplex color, if we go to 2D textures here, it doesn't have that. So let's go ahead and just do that same exact thing. We'll drag the out color onto the color, and we'll just take this and put it to something like 30 and 30, and you can see that there's no tiling artifact, which is really, really cool. The other thing that this does that's really kind of nice is it also has the ability to not just do fractals, but it can do cellular patterns. And let's just change that scale so it's a little easier to see. So it can do these, kind of dot patterns, leather skin patterns, things like that, kind of skin type patterns. And it can also do ridged patterns. So these are going to be, really good for doing things like lightning effects and things like that, or cracks and grounds and things like that. So it's a very, very flexible noise generator that's very fast and, again, doesn't have those tiling artifacts. The other thing that's kind of nice about it is it has the ability to be distorted. So let's go ahead and just see what happens if we grab another noise, and we're going to distort one of these noises with the other noise. So we're going to take this guy, and it allows you to start to build up, these really kind of robust procedural shading networks. So we'll go ahead and do something like that. And then if you start to increase that distortion, you can see how that really starts to affect the overall feel of that guy. And as I move these guys around or change the frequency of that, you can really start to distort these objects and break them up. And that looks pretty cool. The other thing that's really kind of nice about this is it filters very, very cleanly. So if you're using Mental Ray, or if you're even the hardware shader, the filtering on it's super, super sweet. Let's go ahead and just take a look at that when we'll shove it into a bump. So we'll go and we'll put this back to color, get our kind of red logo back on there, guy. And we'll just drag and drop this onto the bump map. And we'll drop that bump down to something like a value of 0.1. And you can start to see, that looks kind of cool, kind of gives us like this little leather texture. But the thing that's kind of nice about this is if I take this noise and I just, really overdrive it, it still samples really, really cleanly. Even if we go and do something like a Mental Ray render inside of our shader here, you can see how nice and clean that samples, because, again, you don't get that tiling artifact. So that's just a quick example of a few of the things that have been improved as far as doing look dev work inside of Maya 2016 with the new utility nodes in the Hypershade window. Thanks a lot for checking it out. Cheers.